I think that we're probably more so in agreement.
Okay, then maybe we mostly agree. I guess here's okay. So here's my thought. Getting into the more controversial. So this idea of trans women are women. I think that's probably the central idea that people like Matt Walsh get really upset about, right?
Hmm.
More so than anything else. I feel like that's the thing he would really object to. I think the reason that that's becoming an issue is that we're defining women differently. So he's defining women, adult human female.
Hmm.
You're defining women. I guess I shouldn't assume your definition, but a lot of people just kind of say it's a matter of self-identity. A woman is just anyone who says they're a woman.
Right.
So even if we go into this, like, fine, agree to disagree, then how can it be transphobic to have a different definition than you?
Well, there's a couple things. Is I'm not saying this is what you're doing, but obviously, if you have a definition, for example, like having a different definition can still be bigoted. So, like, if I'm like, well, I define human as being only white people, like that would, I can have
Sure.
a different definition, but it's still bigoted, right? And
Yeah.
it's more so of a huge misunderstanding of the difference between sex and gender, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not so much you have a vagina, so therefore you're a woman. It's more so that you have a vagina and there are certain expectations that are placed on you because you're a woman.
Yeah.
And that's why there's an old quote I think from the 70s that said, "Womanhood is taught, not something you're born with." And I think that a lot of that kind of comes from this idea that, sorry,
Mm.
hold on, I'm trying to get my thoughts clear here, and I'm also placing an order for food because I'm a fat
No, this is
ass.
good.
Once my food gets here, I'm dipping stream. All right.
I
I
mean,
have an out.
here's what
Okay,
I'd say to
I
that.
can weasel out of this one, but no, I'm just kidding. I think what it really comes down to is you have gender identity, right?
Yeah.
So your gender identity does not necessarily, it strongly correlates, but it is not
Mhm.
causal. It is not caused by your biology. So
Okay.
the example that I like to lay out, because I think it really kind of illuminates this, is if you take somebody with a penis or a vagina and you put them in a padded room since birth,
Hmm.
and they grow up with no exposure to really anything, somebody with a penis is not going to just naturally grow up to want to have their hair short, to think that they can't cry, to like big trucks. Like, that's very much a social thing, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas somebody with a penis, you put them in a padded room, they will have higher levels of testosterone. There's no question
Right.
about it because that is a causal thing, whereas gender is just correlated.
Yeah. And I totally agree. I don't think it would be correct to say. I don't think it's a tenable position to say sex and gender are the same thing. And I don't know if that's what Matt Walsh's position is. I have no idea, but
It is.
I would say that. Oh, okay.
That's
If it
his
is, then I
position.
think that's kind of short-sighted. But yeah, we can agree that, like, sex is the an objective measure of something, and gender is societal expectations and norms surrounding that and how you express yourself. Like, we can agree on that, but how does that play into the idea of the term man and woman are these objective terms and not self-identity?
Well, I don't think that any term is objective necessarily. Like, we construct language. So language always has the ability
Sure.
to change and to better and more adequately define certain things. So I think what it is
Sure.
that this is a disagreement between how we're defining woman. Whereas I would define
Yeah.
woman,
Yeah.
yeah, I would define woman as somebody who firstly identifies as a woman, and although I would say this isn't like required to be a woman, because being a woman is not like a performance,
Hmm.
usually when you have trans people who identify as a woman or as a man, they are going to take steps to align their appearance more so with the gender expectations and gender roles that are usually
Hmm.
correlated with certain sexual characteristics but are not caused. So
Right.
when Matt Walsh says, "Oh, a woman is a human female," I don't really think that's
Adult human
totally
female. Yeah.
an adult human female. Like, that's not accurate because what's a female then? Okay, somebody with this chromosome makeup, someone with these sets of genitals. You don't see any of that when you identify somebody as being a
Sure.
woman.
But again, that comes back to just because sex determination can be difficult doesn't mean the reality is fuzzy.
Well, it's more so
Like, if
that
I
if
see if
somebody
I see Blair White in a restaurant, I'll probably be like, "Oh yeah, that's a woman." But it doesn't, like, that just means I'm using the term. That doesn't mean, like, she is a woman, right?
well, I would argue she absolutely is a woman. Yes.
Right. And and that's where the disagreement comes in. But
because it's ultimately a form of identity because of the way that trans people perceive themselves. There's literal biological evidence of this too. It's not just like, oh, I want to be a girl, lol. It's like you can see the way
no,
that
no, no.
like brain chemistry works with as far as like estrogen receptors and makes it more likely that people who are biologically male might identify as a woman, not as
Right.
female.
And
So
I'm not here to say that people who struggle with that are like it's not genuine. Like obviously it is.
right.
But going back, because I think this is important. If you define woman as adult human female, and you're saying woman is just a matter of identity, there's three parts to that definition, right? There's adult, human, and female. Do you agree with the other two, that you have to be human and that you have to be an adult to be a man or woman?
Um, to be a woman, I mean, I guess so, yeah, because we
Like a
would say,
dog, like a male dog can never be a man, right?
yeah, and we would never say that this person is a woman if she's like a 5-year-old little girl.
So you are allowed to put constraints on, hey, you're not allowed to, like if a 6-year-old girl, you say you cannot define or identify as a woman until you hit this
Well, if she was
definition, right?
if there was somebody who was like, say, biologically male who was like 6 or 7, but they had gender dysphoria, then they would probably identify as a girl, not as a woman. Yeah.
Right, but but this is what I'm saying is like we're saying you have to use this term, not that term, because the term woman has something more than just simply I identify as this. Like that
But
can't be the
woman isn't
only.
only. It's the hang up that we're here getting on already is that it's woman is not a biological term. Even if you look up the actual definition of woman, it says adult
Wouldn't
human
you say
female.
the
It
person would
also
have to be
says
past
in
puberty
regards
to
to
say they're a
social.
woman?
It also says in regards to social expectations and roles. You can look up the definition of woman on Google. Like Matt Walsh
Right?
is
Doesn't
giving
it
a
require that you be
painfully
past puberty to be a woman though? Isn't that putting a biological definition on it?
to be a woman. I mean, I guess saying an
I thought you
adult
were agreeing
is
with
like
that earlier. I thought you were agreeing with that earlier, right? When you said a 6-year-old girl couldn't say woman, she would have to say girl.
yeah, 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 but I mean, woman and girl is now we're talking about a difference in age, right? Not necessarily
Right.
puberty.
But
Like
my,
there are
my whole
people who
point
we
is
would
that
might consider being a young woman who's
yeah,
like 16 still going through puberty. Like I don't think that that's like the defining thing.
right. So I don't know if are you conceding then that the term man and woman can have criteria beyond simply how someone feels or identifies?
Well, it depends on what criteria you're referring to, right? So like obviously if I say I am a woman, or if you're talking about somebody who's like 3 years old saying I'm a woman, well, woman doesn't only refer to the self-identity in that sense. It also does refer to a sense of time. How old are you? Your
Mhm.
age. Something that is not an identity, right? But you could
Right.
be a girl. You could identify as a girl. The difference between woman and girl is just usually just differentiating between like a child or an adult. The hang up comes from people who want to try to say that a woman is somebody who has these chromosomes and a vagina and this thing, where that's just not true. Like,
I just don't see why one is okay and the other is not. Like putting a level
because
of
not all of this
maturity.
is a form of identity. So like that's why
Well,
you
age
can.
is definitely a form of identity.
Well,
Even if you
no,
can't control it,
it's
even
socially
if you can't control it, it's still a form of identity.
no.
You don't
Age
think
is
so?
a no. The way that we measure age is a social construct, but you cannot identify with a certain age. No, it's
Oh,
not a.
no, right. You can't choose it, but don't you still in some way identify with your age, or no? You
You
don't think
might
so?
identify with it, but that doesn't make it the identity in the same sense that I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about is like self-identification, right? So you
Okay,
cannot identify as being 60 years old because it's not a
right.
socially constructed form of identity to begin with. Whereas a man and a woman, those are socially constructed identities. That's why I get really annoyed when people are like, "Oh, can I be an attack helicopter?" Well, it's like that's not a gender identity. That's not a constructed identity to begin with. But there are other identities that we already accept throughout society that are socially constructed, that have no bearing in biology, that have no ways to actually prove whether or not you're telling the truth, that we accept and not only accept, give legal protections to. So people can
Could you give a couple other examples that fall under that besides gender? Maybe that would
yeah,
help
I
me
would I
understand.
would say religion. I think that religion's a pretty good one because although it's not a direct one to one because you can change your religion, whereas people who have a gender
Yeah.
identity are a little bit more intrinsic there, it's still something that I could tell you right now. I could say I'm an atheist, and 2 minutes later I could say, oh, actually now I'm a Muslim. You actually have
Right.
no way of proving that I'm
But would I
telling.
be considered bigoted for calling you out on that, saying, "Hey, I don't buy that"?
I don't know. That's kind of a separate thing.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm just talking about
And maybe
self-identity.
here's a better question. So someone who says I'm a Christian, and they genuinely are like, yes, I'm a Christian. Then you inspect their beliefs, and they're like, I don't even think Jesus really existed. I don't know if I believe in the Trinity. I don't know if he really rose from the dead. Could I rightly say like, hey, I don't think you're a Christian. I think you're not a Christian. Like, I don't think that's.
But again,
I
you're
think that
back
kind
to
of
like
falls apart.
actual identity, right? You're back to forms of descripting and describing yourself. Whereas if somebody was like, I'm a woman, you wouldn't be like, well, let me see what's between your legs. Like you have no way of verifying that. Another example is also like a sports fan. I like to bring that up a lot too. Like if I tell you I'm a fan of the New York Jets, you might say, hey, I've never seen you go to a New York Jets game.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
never seen you wear a New York Jets shirt. You've never even mentioned football before. Well, maybe I'm into the New York Jets because that was my dad's favorite team when I was growing up. And maybe I'm not really a big fan of football now, but I still identify myself as a New York Jets fan because it's something that has meaning to me. You have no way of proving that I'm wrong. You literally cannot disprove it. And so
Yeah.
with the man and the woman thing,
I think the man and the woman you could though. Like, I mean, obviously you don't in ordinary life go and inspect someone's chromosomes, but you could, right?
I mean, eh,
Especially like when
maybe,
you
but
see
the
like
problem
a
with that,
trans man who is clearly pregnant, like you can know they're not biologically male, right?
well, no, because like think about how I'm a man, you're a man. I would assume. I don't want to assume your
Yeah,
gender. Um,
I am.
have you ever seen your chromosomes? I've never seen mine.
I've not.
So how do
No,
you know you're a man? See,
I
like
know
it's,
because I produce sperm.
but that's a sexual characteristic, not a gendered one. If you, for
So you're asking
example,
how do I know I'm a man? Is that what
for
you're asking?
example, let's say that you were infertile. Let's say that you had some kind of damage done where all of a sudden you weren't able to produce sperm. That doesn't mean that you're not a man anymore.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. And
So
before
that's
I
not
was
the only
old enough to produce sperm, yeah. I'm
so
not
that's not
saying
the
you
only
have to currently
defining
be able to.
character of being a man, right? That's why
Right.
it's
My
so
point
hard with
being,
the whole man woman. What is a man? What is a woman? Like there's a
I
lot of
don't think
cultural
so though, because
things.
I'm still saying there's no one who's ever been able to produce sperm who was a female, right?
Female sex.
Right.
There are women who can produce sperm, and there are men who can get pregnant because their biology differs from their gender identity.
Yeah, I don't know how to keep going because it just comes back to our different definition of men and women, right?
Well,
And
it's
that's kind of
not
what I'm
just
getting
that.
at
It's
is
that
why.
this is actually how this is a more this is not only a more inclusive definition, it's a more utilitarian definition as well. It makes
Being
way
more
more.
inclusive doesn't make it a better definition
Well, you're right,
because
but
you're
it's
using a circular definition, which obviously is 100% exhaustive, which
hold on.
no other definition can be.
It's not. Hold on. I recognize that there is a level of circularity there, and there's a lot of different theories involved in what actually how do we define a woman? Is it performance? Is it just behavior? Is it an expression? What exactly is it? But ultimately, no matter what, if you're going to go about this behavior, these expressions, it starts with the identity, with the intrinsic perception of yourself that I am a woman. And there's more to that than just your private parts or just your chromosomes.
Yeah.
Like that's not the only thing that matters there. And the reason I say it's more utility is because that makes the most sense for how we would even define people. Like I would agree with you that if we had like a big problem with like big muscular burly guys with giant beards saying like, yo, I'm a woman, then like maybe you'd have a point. But like what's the medical advice, right, for people that are trans with gender dysphoria? Socially transition first. Make an effort to actually express your gender as being the one that you want to be identified as. Like there's just, I don't know, it just seems to make more sense from a utility perspective too, that like it's really
I
hard to
mean, maybe
rule
yeah,
out
from
whether or not somebody
utility,
is
yeah.
it's hard to rule out whether or not somebody is lying when they say they're a woman. Like say you had no idea who Blair White was, right? And then she came up to you and was like, hey, I'm a woman. You would literally not ask any questions. You'd just be like, okay, yeah, of
Correct.
course.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd be like,
Yeah.
duh, you're a fucking woman, of course. Like, what? Of course. But it's
Yeah.
because, right, she not only identifies as one, she's also taken steps to express herself as a woman, as what we socially recognize as being woman behavior or woman clothing. But that's all socially constructed. And if Blair White
Yeah.
decided that she didn't want to wear a dress one day, that doesn't mean that she's no longer a woman. It ultimately comes down to the self-perception.
Yeah, and I just think that's the point that people can reasonably disagree on without being considered hateful, right? To say no, that these terms are objective, they're not
Well, I mean, when you
self-identity,
have
right?
people who are suffering mental illness because of societal discrimination, and then you have individuals that are saying, no, you're not a real woman based on my definition, I kind of do see that as being pretty bigoted. Like, what you're saying only follows as trans women are not women. So you're
I mean,
denying their gender identity. You're denying a sense of who they are, which,
no, I'm just denying that the term woman is a gendered term. That's all
I
I would
mean,
be
you
doing.
can deny that, but that's now you're the one denying definitions. Like, go Google the definition of woman. It says it could be an adult human female because colloquially we
Right.
sort of use them interchangeably. But if we're having conversations like the one right now, we have to get technical about definitions, of course. And it also can refer to the social construction around what we perceive to be a woman. Let
So
me
don't
just
those two definitions contradict each other? One of them has to be wrong, right?
hold on. I want to find out exactly here. You know what? Let me correct myself. I was talking about defining gender, actually, not woman or man specifically. Gender
Oh,
is
okay.
either of the two sexes, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones. The term is also used more broadly to denote a range of identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female. So when we're talking about gender, we're talking about the differences between socially constructed forms of identity.
Sounds like gender is basically just describing masculine and feminine.
To a degree, yeah.
'Cause I would totally agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you're actually right to a large degree, but then we get back into the weeds, right? What is masculine?
Sort of.
If
I mean, like,
if at the beginning of
the,
time we all decided that masculine was somebody who wore a dress and loved lipstick, then nowadays if I said, yeah, this person's really masculine, you'd be referring to someone who most likely identified as a woman.
right.
Like, that's still socially constructed. That's still in the nitty gritty, in the weeds. What is masculine? What is feminine? These things
Yeah.
all change. These all have like socially constructed definitions.
Right. And being a woman who is, or I guess a female who has masculine traits, doesn't make her a man, right?
Right. Because it's
So
also
how
a
does
form
that
of
how does that work?
because it's also a form of self-perception and identity. That's why it's
So
not
would you
solely
say
on
that
what.
pretty much? It sounds like that pretty much trumps everything, though. Self-identity.
No, it's what that ultimately comes back to. Because again, you said, what is a man, for example? You said, I know I'm a man because I can produce semen. But you also acknowledge that, well, if I'm not able to produce semen, that doesn't mean that I'm not a man.
Right.
So ultimately, it comes back to how
So
you
it's yeah.
perceive yourself. You perceive
I don't think
yourself
I
as
don't
being
think
a
that's
man.
just because I perceive myself to be a man, though.
You might be able to say that, but we can
I mean,
argue all day
if
about
I
like,
don't
well,
have
this
any,
means this is what it means to be a man. No, this is what it means, and there will never be, when it comes to a definition like this, there's never an all-encompassing definition. That's why I've heard people like Destiny and Vosh bring up similar arguments, which is, can you define a chair? I want a definition that defines all chairs, and that doesn't define anything that's not a chair. Is a chair something you sit on? Well, I can sit on my table. I can sit on the ground. Is the ground a chair? Is a chair something with four legs? I'm pretty sure I've seen chairs that don't necessarily have four
yeah,
legs. We could do that all day. There's no
yeah.
actual all-encompassing definition.
Then is the
And
alternative to just say a chair is anything that we call a chair?
no, but I don't think that's what we're doing
That's,
right now either.
I,
I don't think that we're saying a woman is just anything we call a woman. It's
or anything that
somebody
calls
who
itself a woman.
identifies as a woman and usually, not necessarily, but usually takes steps to express themselves that way as well.
So is that the common definition, though? Like as far as what society has. It seems
Oh,
like we're
people are
probably
bringing up
pretty
in
pretty
chat too. They're
split.
saying a horse has four legs and you sit on it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
a horse isn't a chair, so.
Yeah, no disagreement there. I don't know if this helps the discussion at all, but would you agree that gender and sex are, even in today's modern, like, woke or whatever you want to call it, is still constantly being conflated with each other, even among like people who should know better?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. And I think that that's definitely doesn't do any favors
Yeah.
for people like me who are trying to be very technical with these
Yeah.
things.
Well, because I found this, there's American Psychological Association, who, and they basically say male and female are gender terms, and this is supposed to be like a legit
What year was that?
organization. Let me see. I don't have the link. I just have the quote. Um, so I don't know. And then there's the National Center for Trans Equality. It says both the adjectives male and female, as well as the nouns man and woman, are in reference to a person's gender identity.
Well, they
See
might
why
be
that can be
talking.
confusing, right?
I absolutely, but I think that to be charitable to the thing you just read, I think that what they're talking about is colloquially speaking. So like when you're talking to your friend, oh that's a girl, that's a woman, that's a man, that's a male. That like we kind of use all those things interchangeably. But again, I think
Mhm.
what that source you just read is getting at is how are you determining that somebody you're looking at is a male? It's ultimately because of the way they're expressing their gender,
Right.
not their biology.
Yeah.
So I feel like the way that I'm defining gender is far more provides far more utility.
Provides far more utility. I mean, but I don't think the definition, the alternative definition, negates that in any way, right?
The
Go back to the
alternative
Blair White
definition
example.
is making it very strictly biological, which ends up
Right, but
ruling.
it doesn't take away from the utility. We went back to the Blair White example. Someone who holds that definition would still benefit from the utility of that situation. And it's not
No,
like
because
they're
by defining it strictly on the terms of biology, now you are leaving out people that are women like Blair White from your definition. Your definition has now lost utility. It hasn't gained any.
how does it lose utility though in that casual
Because Blair
setting?
White is a woman, we
Right,
would
and you
all
would call her a
identify her
woman.
as a woman,
Yeah,
even though her
that would still
biological makeup
happen.
is different.
Yeah, and that would still happen because no one goes around and inspects
No, it
chromosomes.
wouldn't, though. Well, okay, maybe colloquially again, but what you're saying is if we define woman based on adult human female, now if they don't have the female sexual characteristics, you can say they're not a woman, which
Right, if
takes
I
away
happen to find out
utility.
that they weren't. Yeah, exactly.
Which takes away utility. My food's here. I'm not gonna leave. I'll be right back. I just gotta bring it inside real quick.
Okay.
Just hold on a minute. Can you hear me? You still there?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
All right. This is going to be the last conversation I have, guys. Sorry to everybody else in the waiting room. My food is here now. I want to end the stream after I'm done talking to Seethi here. So if
We
anybody
got
else
like
wants to
15 minutes
donate,
left. How much do you want?
just we'll just see where the conversation goes. I'm really
Okay.
enjoying this one anyway.
Okay, cool.
If anybody else wants to donate though and have their message read when I am done with this conversation, now is the time to do it. I've lost a lot of brain cells, not from this conversation. No, nothing personal there. But from the stream in general and from being totally let down when BX bitchface just dodged. So, yeah, if anybody wants to help support the channel, now's your chance to do it and have your message read and responded to. Anyway, sorry about that. Where were we at again?
I think we were talking about
Yeah,
utility, but
utility.
I
Yeah.
feel like we just kind of, yeah, we can still talk about that, but I just feel like we're not seeing utility the same way. But
Well, no, I mean, what's the point of a definition, right? It's supposed to encompass as many.
okay,
I don't.
yeah.
I'm
So
trying to
I,
think
I
how
would
I would
say,
like to describe this. It's supposed to encompass as many things that fit that definition as possible.
I would say if you have
Kinda
two
circular.
definitions, just saying the one that's more exhaustive is better. I don't think that's correct. It could be more exhaustive and still be a bad definition.
Possibly, but I've laid out an example of where my definition serves more utility. It's not just more exhaustive. Like you and I would recognize Blair White as a woman.
Yeah, right.
We would see her in a restaurant and say that's a woman. You see people
Right.
wearing dresses, makeup, lipstick. You perceive them as being a woman.
Right.
You never see their biology. But if you did, Or if, for example, you found out that like Blair White was like, yeah, I'm not able to have any children because, I'm trans or something.
Mhm.
Then all of a sudden now you're like, oh, well, I guess according to the definition, adult human female, you're not a woman.
Right.
But she is
But
one. And she's perceived as
but
one. And
but
she acts
that's
as
begging the
one.
question. Like where does the utility fail in that conversation?
It fails because you leave out people that are women from the definition of woman based strictly on
But that
biology.
yeah.
Yeah.
What why does that make the definition, or why does that make it an inferior definition?
Because woman is referring to gender identity, gender expression, and socially constructed norms.
See,
And
that's the very thing we're disagreeing on, though. So it's kind of like begging the question, right?
I mean, I don't think that I
Like you're
don't.
saying my definition is wrong because it leaves out people that fall under your definition. I don't see
Well,
how
no,
that
it's
makes
not.
mine
It's
a
not
worse
just that.
definition.
No, it's that once we recognize the definition of gender, my definition is correct. Of how we recognize definitions right now, gender
We
is.
agree on the definition of gender. We disagree on the fact that man and woman are the gender terms.
So, what else
Maybe
would they
this
be
will help.
considered?
All right, so maybe this will help. So would you agree that, like, okay, when did the transgender movement really take off? Like like the intellectual aspect, like the 50s, right?
I don't
Something
know,
around
but I
there.
know for a fact, by the way, that there have been conversations about gender differences between and not being biological for virtually forever. Even in the
Okay.
1800s, you can find examples of people who were identified with a different gender than their sex.
Okay, fair enough. But say like back in the 50s or before the 50s, would you agree at that point in the cultural context, man and woman were just biological terms? Like there wasn't this idea of gender identity, right?
Um, it depends what you're talking about. Again, like in the 1800s, it may have not been as well fleshed out and thought out of, but like gender, for example, has always existed since human civilization, right?
So what would that's interesting. So like if you found like a dictionary from 1950, how would it describe gender the same way we are now?
Probably not. I would guess that it would probably be much more on a biological basis. But again, that's
Yeah.
why definitions are also
Yeah.
socially constructed.
So
We can change them to
yeah.
make them more, serve more utility.
Yeah. Here's what I would say as far as utility goes. We've gotten to a point where we are recognizing this sex and gender are much more separated than we previously thought, right? And I
Uh-huh.
think if we want to do that, the way to go is to actually flesh out the terms for each, and instead of like conflating them, right? Like why can't we just say, okay, man and woman is adult human female, or woman is adult human female, but we also have this gender term and it is this new term. Like why is it we have to take this term man and woman
Because
and
that would be
pull them out?
serving way less utility than just recognizing the difference between gender and sex and how those terms are usually recognized both colloquially and socially. Like, if I'm like, okay, now you can be because your biology is that of a female, but you're now going to be called the bling blong. You're a bling blong and I'm a ming mong.
Mhm.
Like by that point now we're just
Right,
like
and those are
we're
like silly sounding definitions, but why is it so wrong to have additional words to describe a new concept or
I
a
mean people
more
do
fleshed out
non-binary
concept?
for example, right?
Right. What do you mean?
Like non-binary is a new term.
No,
Although
no, but
non-binary people have existed, it's a new
so
term
would you
that we're
call them
using.
a man or woman? Is there a third term besides man and woman that you would refer to a non-binary
They wouldn't go as
person?
either
Okay.
because they identify outside of the socially constructed gender binary.
Right. So I guess, yeah. I guess what I'm getting at is that in at least American culture, the view that has been the case for the longest time is that man and woman were basically just biological sense, right?
Not
And we're now
not
you don't
really
think
though.
so?
Well, so for example, like someone in chat's telling me this. I do not know if this is true. So if I'm wrong, then I'm sorry. But someone said that the idea of even chromosomes is like relatively new as far as back at like the 80s.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So
I'm sure the whole sex determination process was way more,
it was
or not as
probably just like you have a
not as
penis, that's
accurate.
the end of it kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But like again, women were defined, yes, as being maybe like the people that give birth, but they were also, which would be biological in that sense, but they were also defined as like the caretaker. That's social. That's a
Yeah,
socially constructed thing. Women do not
absolutely.
have to be caretakers, and if
Right.
they're not a woman all of a sudden. So, like even though we're getting more precise with our definitions now, it doesn't mean that like gender actually didn't exist or something, right?
Oh no, I mean yeah. My point is that it's my understanding that the terms man and woman for a long time were basically synonymous with male and female. Obviously, being precise with boy or girl, with the age or whatever. And now we're making greater distinctions. We're saying sex and gender are different. We need to make sure they're distinct. And now you can, I guess, say you're a male woman. Is that? I mean, I feel like even that would be offensive, right? Even though it sounds like that would be technically true under your worldview, right?
It would be technically true, yeah, and they're
But would that
probably
be
going to be,
offensive?
I mean, maybe to some like woke scolds, but most trans people, again, remember that they are aware that their biology is differing from their gender identity. That's
Yeah.
why they have gender dysphoria.
Right.
So I feel like you're, and I'm not saying this is like a gotcha, but I feel like you might be appealing a little bit to tradition here. That like, well, since we've known this for a long time, like, for example, a long time ago,
Right.
we would consider awful. The word awful used to be something positive because
Yeah.
it's similar to awesome. But now, if
Yeah.
I say, yeah, this dude's awful here, you're probably gonna take that as an offense, not
Yeah.
as me complimenting you. So
Right.
definitions change over time
Yeah. Yeah.
because
No, and
they.
I'm not arguing that definitions can't change or that they shouldn't change. I guess what I'm getting at is right now we're kind of in this midst of it's trying to change and it's not quite there yet because I mean
Well, that's
yeah
just
there's
anytime progress is made, you are always going to have dipshit bigots like Matt Walsh who are there
but
pushing
see I
against
don't
it.
know if
Like,
that's really fair though. Why is it that
it
wanting
is
to hold
fair.
on to a previous definition is wrong?
This is
Why
the
can't there be a
well,
difference of opinion?
this kind of thing happened before, right? Where people would say, "Hey, who was it? Galileo said, "Hey, the Earth is circling the sun," right? Or, um,
Okay, but we
yeah,
can't use these like things that are verifiably true or false. We're talking about these abstract concepts, right? Like
that's true. Yeah, that's not a good
I'm
comparison.
trying to think of a good I don't know if you want to get into it, but like the idea of race, like
That's changed also.
if we got to I mean, but we're not at the point where we can say like you know, there's race, which is like this biological ancestry, and then there's ethnicity, which is cultural. And I can be a white male, but I can be a black. I can identify as black.
Well,
If you say
ethnicity,
I'm not
right,
truly
is
black, yeah, but would we say that the terms like black or white are ethnicity or are they race? I would say we currently see those as race.
I
Say
mean,
that oh now
definitely
we're
if we're
gonna
talking about
kind of like
scientists, then they don't even look at race. They look at these things called clines to determine someone's like ancestral or whatnot.
okay,
Um,
I don't actually know how that works, but yeah. But
I don't
you would
either.
still have a
I'm
problem
not equipped
if
to argue
people
that element of it.
yeah, I'm just saying the idea like if transracialism started to get more common and there's already like a few people in the media, I don't know how legit they are. If that started to become more common, like should we just accept that or are we considered bigoted if we kind of push back like hey, it's kind of unfair to like try and grab onto the cultural identity of, you know, people who
I
suffered
think
all
the reason
this
it's bigoted was,
discrimination.
I think it's bigoted in the sense of, um, just holding on to an inadequate definition of woman, like what Matt Walsh is doing, because again, you are excluding people who are women from your definition, and you're doing so usually not you specifically, but like Matt Walsh, he's doing so because he's transphobic. He doesn't like trans people. He thinks they're mentally ill. He thinks they're degenerate, and so he is kind of pushing
Sure.
this. Oh well, woman is just an adult human female. Okay, what's an adult human female? Is it just somebody with a vagina? Or is there more to being a female or a woman than having a vagina? He would have to say yes because he would look like a fucking lunatic if he said, no, all it is having a vagina. There's more to it. There's also chromosomal makeup. What if their
I
chromosomes aren't completely accurate? Are they still a woman? He would have to say yes. And that's what I mean is that it's not
but I
so,
still think yeah, we can objectively determine
but
female.
it's not as cut and dry as like I want to
Of course
rename
not.
the color black to be the color white. It's
But
that
something being
there's a
hard to
ton
determine
of
doesn't mean it's not
abstraction
objective.
and nuance between what is exactly a woman and what exactly classifies someone as a woman or a female, and how do we move forward with that. Making a more better encompassing definition, I really don't think is
It's not like people are being excluded from the prior definition. They're just being put into a different category that
they're
they
being put into a
disagree
category
with.
that denies their self-perception and their gender identity. That's like saying I'm going to start defining
But
all.
again, we're
No,
but
it's
again, that's assuming that the term man is a gender term. That's what we're disagreeing on.
well,
Like
now I guess maybe
why
are you begging the question a little bit? Because like a lot of this is
what
very
way?
semantics, but like again, if I said
I was just proposing that that's kind of the normative definition of man is it's a sex term. specific to
It's just not,
adult
though. In your
humans.
day-to-day life, like, you don't abide by this. You
I
don't.
mean,
Like,
the
I know so when
determination
I'm
of
in a
who,
when I'm in
yeah.
a grocery store, I usually can tell if someone's a man or a woman based on their appearance and their behavior and whatnot. But at the end of the day, why are they carrying out that behavior and that appearance? It's
Yeah.
probably because they were socially taught that in a way, and they had a general idea of who they are. They perceive themselves as being this way. If
Mhm.
I said I'm going to start including the definition of Christian as only somebody that goes to church multiple times every week, because back in the olden days people would go to church on Wednesdays and they would go to church on Sundays. So
Yeah.
that, in a way, if I said, well, what's wrong with me holding on to the old definition? Well, the problem here again is you're excluding people that are actually sincere Christians because your definition is not adequate.
So would you say if a Christian didn't believe Jesus ever existed, we were not allowed to deny that identity
I think that would
if they
probably
hold
go
views
right
that are
along the line with
antithetical?
somebody who said if they don't believe they are a woman, right? They probably
No,
wouldn't be a
there are
woman.
plenty of people who claim to be Christian who flat out deny basic tenets of Christianity, right?
I mean, maybe, but again, what does it mean? Like, this goes right in
You're
line with
saying
what.
it's not just how you feel or your identity, even if it's
Well,
genuine.
no. It's what you ultimately believe. That's why I like bringing up the religion thing. You perceive yourself, you believe yourself to be a woman, even if you're biologically male, and you believe in Jesus, regardless of any other thing. That part is what makes you the Christian, is your belief. You can't prove my belief wrong. You
Mhm.
cannot prove that I don't believe in Jesus. Even as a fucking atheist myself, you couldn't technically prove that other than just like arguing that like you're not really doing anything that would be associated with a Christian. But like that doesn't mean that I'm not necessarily a Christian. There are some people, by the way, that are simply culturally Christian.
Yeah, and I guess my point there is it's not wrong to call those people out and say, hey, you're not actually Christian
Um, I mean, I'm not
if they're
saying
not
it's
living up to the
wrong.
name,
Like
right?
if you call them out, I don't really care. It's more that like you don't actually know. You cannot know for certain
Sure,
if they're a Christian or not.
I agree, and you can't know for sure if someone's a man or a woman just by looking at them. Yeah,
Right.
but how does that? Yeah,
But again, this is what I mean is with the deductive reasoning thing, right? Is you don't know at the end of the day if someone's a Christian or not. If you're in line at a grocery store, you don't know if the person in front of you is a Christian or not. Even if they tell you they're a Christian, you don't know for sure. You don't know how to prove it because you can't, because it's a form of self-identification and self-perception and belief.
yeah.
But
So
Christians also generally take steps to present themselves as the thing that they are.
yeah,
So you might be able to say, well, are they going to church often? Do they go to church every Sunday? Do they go to a Christian church? Now there are certain actions and expressions that go along with their identity. But again, just if they don't go to church doesn't mean that they're not a Christian. Similarly, if somebody identifies as a woman, they might take steps to express themselves that way, as is literally recommended by like medical professionals. Um, like they're wearing a dress or they're acting in ways that are culturally recognized as being feminine. But if they are not adhering to all of those things, it doesn't mean that
mhm,
they are not a woman.
yeah. Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. I'll say it back to you to see if you agree. So, here's your statement. I want to know if this is correct. Because we ordinarily determine that someone is a man or woman by looking at them, therefore, the definition of man or woman is based on those characteristics. Like
Um,
because the determination we make is based on outward appearance, therefore,
it's deductive, yeah. Same, like it's literally the same way that you look at somebody who's wearing a dress with long hair. That right now you would probably deduce that they have a vagina.
yeah. Okay. I'll have to sit and think about that because I'm not. I see where you're getting at, but like I think there's a philosophical thing behind that. Like because this is how we ordinarily deduce something, therefore this is how it's defined. I don't
Well,
think those
no,
are
I don't think that that's
necessarily
the only
true,
thing
right?
because it's not just the deduction; it's also the self-identification and the self-belief, just like with a Christian.
Hmm.
So you can deduce that this person is a Christian based on the fact that they are going to church, based on the fact that maybe they have a Christian fish on their car,
Yeah.
but you don't know for certain. We can never know for certain because it's a sense of self-perception and belief and identity. So yeah.
right, cool. This was fun, man. I'd love to do this again.
Yeah, let's keep talking. You know, I totally agree
I
that it's
hope
a
I come
very
off. I hope I. Yeah, I hope I come off charitable because I know a lot of people calling are just haven't
no,
really thought
you're
through their position.
this is why I enjoy these conversations, is because I can tell you've thought through it, and it gives me a chance to better explore my positions as well, you know? So I really, no, I enjoyed this conversation a lot, and I recognize that it's very semantic. It's very much like, I'll close with this, we're in a tough spot right now because language evolves and language changes, and that takes time, right? I saw somebody in chat, and they made a good point that, like, Latin did not become Spanish overnight. Like, there were things that took time to change as we start to recognize different definitions, or definitions that make more sense in certain areas. And yeah, I think that we're kind of in a weird transition period, pun intended.
Unintended, yeah. Sweet.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks for the
I
convo,
appreciate it.
and let's try to talk
Have a good
again.
one.
All right.
Definitely. All right.
See you. BioEco, thank you very much for the $4. My mic is acting up.